Welcome back to the studio and a quick subscriber Q&A regarding Tesla's new solar rental program. And not only have we had several subscribers ask about this in the video comments, but I've also been fielding questions about this from friends of mine over the last several days as word got out about Tesla's solar rental idea. So I have to tell you that my initial thoughts on this were all positive. After researching this fully and thinking it over, I do still think that the long-term obligation of something like a rental agreement is relatively low if it doesn't work out, and that makes it more attractive than a solar lease where you wind up with all of this equipment on your house that's tied to a lease. If you try to sell your house, that can be an incredible problem, and I just don't see that issue with the rental agreement as they've written it out, and so that's great. But there is so much to know and understand about how this rental agreement works. So let's get to it. So first of all, it's not available in every state. Currently, it's available in Arizona, California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New Mexico. And in addition to the fact that it's not available in every state, it's not available in every utility district in every state. So let me pull up this graphic here. This shows the availability in each of the states. You can take a look and see if your utility district is covered by one of these. For example, it doesn't appear that SMUD participates in this, so it wouldn't apply to us either here at the studio or at the Energy Sovereignty Project home. So the next thing to look at are what size systems they're offering. So these are all kind of standard package deals. I expect that they're doing that for logistics on Tesla's end. Very smart thing to do. You're able to then send the appropriate crew. You already know what gear is going to be staged at the install site, that kind of thing. So they offer these in a 3.8 kilowatt size, a 7.6 kilowatt size, and an 11.4 kilowatt system. And the regional prices for these vary slightly, but they are generally either $50 or $65, and they're done in increments. So in California, where it's $65 for a small system, then you would have $65 for a small, $130 for the medium-sized system, and then a large system in California would be $195 a month. And so obviously the yearly payback at the time where you true up, or how much you're going to maybe potentially owe the utility company, that's all going to be based on your actual usage measured against the size system that you choose to set up. And if you have lots of land and to set up a system and you don't use a lot, obviously, then you'll be paid more at the end of the year. If you wind up having an electric vehicle and the system is sized smaller than your needs, then you'll wind up having to actually pay a bit at the end of the year. But we'll cover that in detail in a minute. But first, let's take a look at the equipment that they install. And so this, again, is from Tesla's website. And so the first of the issues that I have with this solar rental idea is that you don't get to choose your panels. Tesla does that. And then you're wondering, well, are they quality panels, or are they panels made in China where there's questionable quality control? I'll look into that further, since by the statement that you see here on their webpage, it's implied that they change what panels they use from time to time. And what I can tell you, though, is that not having a choice already kind of rubs me the wrong way, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But as far as the Chinese panels go, I personally won't deal with Chinese panels. I feel that using cheap Chinese panels is actually what got Solar City into trouble with these fires that they're having on top of the Walmart buildings. I think that it was a low bid decision that wound up coming back to bite them. So when sourcing panels that are going to be on the top of your roof for more than 20 years, I only want to deal with Germany, South Korea, or the United States. Those are all countries that have been burned by China in the past, and so they know to stay away from them and their incredibly shady business practices. But that's a topic for an entire other video on my feelings on Chinese manufacturing and how that works. But we can get into that later on. Now, there is a similar but a less intense issue with the inverters that they choose. Pull this up from their site. And again, I'm not going to comment on this further until I can actually see what equipment they're using, but I'm far less concerned with the inverters than I am with the panels. And none of this matters if you're just planning on leasing and then eventually removing the panels from the roof, or moving from the home where you're planning on installing all of this. But everything that I've said above about my feelings on the type of equipment is important if you're planning on purchasing it. Now, Tesla does offer the ability to purchase the equipment after 5 years. Now, that 5-year period is interesting. I think that that's actually some kind of a legal requirement so that Tesla can get the government tax credits from that. I remember installing the solar here at the studio, and I remember something in that tax paperwork that stated that you had to agree that you were going to own the home for 5 years or more following the install. So I expect that that's exactly what is going on here. And again, by the tax credits, I don't mean to insinuate that you'll be getting the tax credits. You won't. That's all going to go to Tesla. Even if you wind up purchasing that system after 5 years, you're still not going to be able to get those tax incentives. Now, I think that that is a huge part of why Tesla is doing this. Now, I can't blame them for doing this. It's a great way to structure a business model. And if you're renting the equipment, then obviously it's just the right thing for then Tesla to be able to take advantage of those tax credits. So I'm not going to fault them for that. But the last thing that we're going to look at as far as the equipment itself is concerned is the batteries. Currently, there is no offer for renting the Tesla batteries. And that's not entirely a bad thing. If one were to decide then to rent from Tesla, you'd still then be eligible for programs like California's self-generation incentive program, where you can get rebates for the batteries, and you'd also be eligible for federal solar tax credits by doing that. Unfortunately, this probably means, though, that those who would benefit the most from a rental program where you've got a low monthly payment to just bring the equipment in, these people are also not the ones that are likely going to be taking advantage of purchasing the batteries, because if they could purchase the batteries, they wouldn't be renting the equipment. And so that is unfortunate. It ultimately means that the people that are renting the system aren't receiving what I would consider to be a complete system with the batteries as well. And the agreement also says that if at any time you want to continue the rental, there will be a $1,500 removal fee. Now, this was probably the thing that really got my attention more than anything else. And that was because I felt that that $1,500 fee was absolutely reasonable. And that's the kind of thing that I think is really going to make these rental agreements seem very appealing to do if you're not able to purchase the system yourself. So again, like we said, unlike that solar lease where you're locked in, this for a minimal fee you can have it removed. But there is some fine print in this that you're going to need to be aware of. That the first thing that I noticed is that the agreement didn't say that they would uninstall it right away, just that you had to have the system available for them to uninstall. And the only time that I can see that that's really a critical factor is if you are selling your home, you then have to have the new home buyer understand that when they purchase the home, it might still have the solar on top. And if they don't want to continue the lease, then, well, I don't know what Tesla's going to do, actually. They might de-energize the system. I doubt that they're going to keep it energized and then, have something like Tesla continue to, collect the money that they get from the power generation. And the reason I don't think they'll do that is that would require a second meter and some buy-in on their part to be able to figure out what the actual bill is going to be with the power company, and I just don't think that they'd get involved with that kind of a mess. So I think they'll just de-energize it. Well, so that means that it can potentially sit on the roof of the home past the time that the home is sold, and that might create some issues. And then the other interesting part about that de-install in the rental agreement is that they say they won't cover any materials. So they won't cover spare parts, is the way that they put it, right? Or replacement parts. And by that, I think that they mean if you have a roof that they had to cut and make special tiles, if you have a ceramic tile roof, that kind of a thing, that you're then going to have to pay for the replacement tiles that they use. They do guarantee their workmanship for a year against leaks or any other issues, and so that's great. I don't see any issues with that, but it is just important that you be aware that you may be on the hook for some supplies, roofing materials and such. So now we'll start to look at what they offered up as a projected payback. And so for that, we'll start off by talking a little bit about wholesale rates. And renewable energy credits, that's for energy providers, the utility companies, they set up a wholesale market rate for what they will pay for solar power, all right? And again, that's all based on what they pay for power in general, and we'll go into a lot of detail on that. But what I found interesting is that they value large producers far more highly than they do the home personal producers. The general rule of thumb is that it's a 25 kilowatt kind of breakover. If you produce less than 25 kilowatts for your system size, then you'll get paid about half a cent a kilowatt hour, something of that nature. But if you wind up having a system that's larger than 25 kilowatts, then you're perhaps going to get a nickel or more per kilowatt hour for that power. Now, obviously, for a homeowner that has a net metering agreement, your net metering agreement far exceeds obviously anything that is important, that you'll benefit from selling your power on this. But I needed to mention it because this is likely what Tesla is doing. They're creating a virtual grid by combining all the solar rentals they install in any given area so that they can become their own utility and collect this rate when they sell the power. And again, I can offer only praise to Tesla for coming up with this idea. Despite my less than stellar opinion on the whole rental idea, I do commend them for this effort, and I wish them luck with it. I think that will greatly spur on the overall adoption of solar, especially for those that can't afford to install the systems themselves. And I do also think that plays into a greater strategy on the part of Tesla, that they are ultimately going to use these rental agreements in any specific area to actually increase the problem that the duck curve it creates for the utilities, so that they can then leverage these local utilities into installing remote battery locations. So I think that there's probably a greater plan in mind here. But that said, let's go ahead and pull up the chart that Tesla has put on their page to show you what your potential payback might be. So here's that chart. Okay, and so again, they're going over the the different areas where you are, and again, they're basing that. You can see their rental on their small systems, and it's all interesting. But this is where you have to be really, really careful. As those who've been following the Energy Sovereignty Project are now well aware, the idea isn't necessarily to make money off of the solar by producing more than you use, but to have the ability to make, store, and consume the power you need and minimize what you draw from the grid. Energy sovereignty isn't just about the house, though. It's about your transportation as well. And now, when you're following the Energy Sovereignty Project, all you guys are well aware that the transportation takes a lot of power. Well, this chart and the information that it provides here is all based on your payback, and that it's all based on the idea that you're going to have some power left over. Well, if you've been following the Energy Sovereignty Project, you're also understanding that if you have an electric vehicle, you're not going to have power left over. You're going to be paying. And so it's important here to understand that Tesla is not saying that if you pay them $130 a month that you won't have a utility bill, that they'll cover your entire utility bill. They won't. What they're saying is that for that $130 a month for a medium-sized system, that's when, again, the reason I chose that was, again, to compare it to, I've been running numbers comparing it to the Energy Sovereignty Project home, to kind of keep it apples to apples as far as things go. But what they're saying is that for that $130 a month, you will gain a given amount of solar generation to offset your bill. And also, while we're looking at this chart, let me pull up something else that is interesting. This, from a snippet from their rental agreement, this is a little bit of a problem for me, and that shows that you're not locked into these rates that they're showing here on the chart. And so that's unfortunate, because one of the reasons that we purchase solar is that locks us in. We now know exactly how much the power is going to cost us. It costs us how much the system cost. And so in here, Tesla wrote in the ability to raise or lower the amount that they will charge. And so that will affect, obviously, this chart that you see here. If we and again, using the Energy Sovereignty Project as a guide, to date we've generated 10,535 kilowatt hours of solar, and in that total solar production we sent 432 kilowatt hours to the grid, and we consumed 607 kilowatt hours from the grid, and most of that in winter. So to date, if we settled this up, we were to settle up right now, we would be at 175 kilowatt hours of deficit, and then we'd owe the utility company about $50 or so. But it's also, again, important to remember that our home consisted listed in the project doesn't include all of the driving that we've done with the car. It only includes the amount that we've recorded as being driven on sunlight. The remaining of that uncovered driving, that'll be added to our figures when we do our closeout at the end of the year and present our final figures to everybody. But the important takeaway there is that if you have an electric vehicle or two in your household, that you're still going to have a utility bill in addition to that $130 a month that you would pay to Tesla. And so just like we have a settle-up charge at the end of the year, it isn't likely that you're going to be getting any money back, no matter what that chart says. If you have an electric vehicle or two, you're just not. And so, granted, this is far less than what you'd be paying them if you didn't have solar, but it's important to know that. And when you're going into this agreement, that it's not necessarily going to be what your power bill is. So that was a whole lot of information, and so now let me close out by giving you my personal feelings on this, and then we'll kind of tidy this up a little bit. So overall, I'm not against what Tesla is doing here. You have people that simply can't afford solar, and this is a great way to get solar for folks that otherwise wouldn't be able to benefit from it at all. And as we discussed earlier on some of those edge cases where you don't use a lot of power, maybe you will be able to actually make a few dollars at the end of the year by really monitoring how much power you use and installing a system that generates more power than your home uses. But the execution of this all, I'm not really convinced that the execution was as clean as it could possibly be. The method they chose doesn't really address the duck curve. It actually makes sure, like I discussed earlier, that it becomes critical. And again, that might be a long-term strategy on the part of Tesla to leverage utilities to allow them to install battery farms remotely, not in your house. All right. But the thing that I find most difficult to swallow is that they're not installing what I would consider to be a complete system. If the power goes out, you still don't have batteries at your house. Your power goes out, even though you have solar. And as we said earlier, you could purchase the battery separately, but how many are actually going to be able to do that if you're already considering a rental agreement? So the solution that I would have offered, I would have suggested, would have been a solar mortgage. And the way that would work, as opposed to a solar lease or a solar rental agreement, is that you're buying the equipment. And so a typical 30-year mortgage on $100,000, and that would cover, a 20 kilowatt system with 6 batteries, something that really would cover almost all of your needs, even if you had a electric vehicle or two. That'd be around $300 a month. And so then if you throw in things like tax incentives and the SGIP, that self-generation rebate that you get, surely Tesla could do better than $300 a month, especially since they're the ones that also manufacture the batteries. And so my guess is that they could probably do this for somewhere around $200 to $250 a month, not too much more than that $195 that they are quoting for their large system that is actually half the size of the system that would be proposed under something like a solar mortgage. And so that's basically my thought on that. I think that there are other ways to solve this, and if Tesla won't offer something like a solar mortgage, that maybe it would be beneficial to take a second mortgage on a home, or certainly roll a larger system into a new home purchase to then be able to take full advantage of everything that a complete system can offer, like what you're seeing with the Energy Sovereignty Project. I'd love to expand the Energy Sovereignty Project and add another 6 to 8 kilowatts of solar production, and then that would bring us in line with again a total solution. So that about wraps up my my thoughts on the whole rental agreement, and you can leave your thoughts and comments on the video, and we may wind up addressing this with a follow-up video or two, depending on how much interest folks have in this and what other questions that folks might have. And so thanks for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and feel free to like and subscribe if this is the kind of thing that you'd like to see here, and we'll see you next time.